This section is the key to the whole layout.
Wow, I see it now. That's brilliant.
Exactly, this changes everything.
Have you ever walked into a room expecting to lose everything, only to have your life turned upside down in the most beautiful way possible? Imagine walking into an interview for a janitor's position, trembling with fear because your bank account is overdrawn and your child is waiting in the lobby, only to find yourself sitting across from one of the most powerful women in the world. That is exactly what happened to Mark, a struggling single dad whose simple mistake led to a moment that left an entire corporate boardroom in tears. You are not going to believe what this billionaire CEO did when she realized who he really was. Before we dive into this roller coaster of emotion, if you believe that good things come to those who wait, and that kindness still exists in this world, do me a huge favor, hit that like button right now. It helps us share these inspiring stories with more people who need hope. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that touches the heart. Trust me, you'll want to stick around until the very last second of this one. The morning air in the city was biting and cold, matching the gnawing anxiety in Mark's stomach. He adjusted his tie in the reflection of the towering glass skyscraper known as Vance Global. The tie was a relic from a different life, slightly frayed at the edges, worn over a white shirt that had been washed one too many times. Mark looked down at his shoes. They were polished, but the leather was cracking, much like his composure. In his pocket, his hand clutched a crumpled piece of paper, an eviction notice he had received 3 days ago. He had 48 hours left to come up with rent, or he and his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, would be on the street. He looked behind him toward the bus stop bench where a neighbor, Mrs. Gable, was sitting with Lily for an hour. Lily waved, her bright pink mittens a stark contrast to the gray city. She offered him a thumbs up. She didn't know about the eviction. She didn't know that Daddy hadn't eaten dinner last night so she could have a second helping of pasta. She just knew Daddy had a big meeting. Mark forced a smile, waved back, and pushed through the revolving doors of the building. He wasn't here to meet the CEO. He wasn't here for a corporate takeover. Mark was here because he saw a flyer in a laundromat window, * night shift custodial staff needed. Immediate start, *. The lobby of Vance Global was intimidating, a cathedral of marble and steel. The air smelled of expensive espresso and success. Mark approached the front desk, where a receptionist was frantically typing on a keyboard while talking into a headset. She looked stressed. Yes, the Sterling interview is at 9 a.m. sharp. Ms. Vance is already in the boardroom. She is not in a mood for delays, she snapped into the microphone. She looked up at Mark, scanning his suit. It was old, but it was a suit. She saw a tall, well-groomed man who looked terrified. In her chaotic state, she made an assumption. You must be him, she said, hanging up the phone. You're cutting it close. Ms. Vance hates tardiness. Here is your visitor badge. Top floor. Elevator B. Go. Mark blinked, confused. I'm here for the... He started to say janitor position, but the receptionist was already waving him away, pointing toward the elevators. Top floor. Run, she commanded. Mark didn't argue. He needed a job. Any job. Maybe the custodial interview was on the top floor? He grabbed the badge and hurried to the elevator. As he ascended, his ears popped. He looked at the badge. It didn't say, visitor. It said, candidate, M. Sterling. Mark's last name was Sterling. Mark Sterling. It was a common enough name, but he didn't put 2 and 2 together. He just prayed the pay was enough to keep the apartment. The elevator doors opened directly into a waiting area that looked more like a luxury hotel lounge than an office. A woman in a sharp power suit stood there holding a tablet. Mr. Sterling, she asked. Mark nodded. Yes, I'm Mark Sterling. The woman tapped her screen. Excellent. You're the last one. She's been unimpressed all morning. Good luck. You'll need it. She opened a set of double mahogany doors. Mark stepped inside, his heart hammering against his ribs. The room was vast. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking the city skyline. At the center was a long table, and at the head of it sat Eleanor Vance. She was a legend in the business world, a self-made billionaire known for her ruthless efficiency and her brilliant architectural vision. She didn't look up as Mark entered. She was studying a set of blueprints spread out before her, a frown etched deeply onto her face. "Sit," she commanded, her voice calm but authoritative. Mark sat. He felt incredibly small. "I've read your file," Eleanor said, still looking at the blueprints. "Impressive background. Oxford. 10 years consulting in Dubai. Specialization in sustainable urban infrastructure." Mark froze. The air left his lungs. Oxford? Dubai? There had been a mistake. A massive mistake. He opened his mouth to correct her, to tell her he was a former mechanic who had been out of work for 2 years, but she finally looked up. Her eyes were piercing blue, intelligent and intimidating. "However," she continued, "resumes are just paper. I don't hire paper. I hire vision. Tell me, Mr. Sterling, looking at this project." She slid the blueprint across the polished table toward him. "What is the single biggest failure you see?" Mark looked at the blueprint. It was a design for a massive new community center and library complex. He shouldn't have been able to understand it. He should have confessed right then that he was there to empty the trash cans. But something happened. Before his life fell apart, before the tragedy that stripped him of everything, Mark hadn't just been a mechanic. Years ago, he had studied drafting. He had wanted to be an architect. He had built his own home from the ground up before the medical bills took it. He looked at the lines. He looked at the flow of the structure. I think there's a mistake," Mark stammered. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Yes, that is why I am asking you to find it." The last 3 candidates complimented the aesthetic. They were yes men. "I hate yes men." Mark looked closer. He forgot about the lie. He forgot about the janitor job. He just saw the building. He traced a line with his finger. "It's not the aesthetic," Mark said, his voice gaining a weird, quiet confidence. "It's the flow. You have the children's reading area here, on the south side, surrounded by glass." "Correct," Eleanor said. "Natural light. It's a feature." "It's a greenhouse," Mark corrected her. "With the southern exposure and that curvature of the glass, by 2 p.m., the temperature in that specific room will spike 15 degrees higher than the rest of the building unless you spend a fortune on specialized cooling. Plus, look at the load-bearing wall here. It blocks the line of sight from the parents' waiting area. A parent can't see their child. No parent will relax in that cafe if they can't see their kid." Mark stopped. He realized he was critiquing a billionaire's project. He pulled his hand back. "I mean, that's just what I see." The room went silent. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Eleanor stared at him. Then, she stared at the blueprint. She took a red marker and circled the area he pointed to. She looked back at him, her expression unreadable. "You're right," she whispered. "The thermal gain. I missed it. The engineers missed it. And the sight line, that is a fundamental safety flaw." She leaned back, studying him with new interest. "You have a very practical eye, Mr. Sterling. It's rare to find someone who understands the human element of design, not just the math. Why did you leave Dubai?" Mark felt the sweat trickle down his back. The lie had gone too far. He couldn't keep this up. He wasn't the Oxford graduate. He was Mark, the guy who was 3 days away from being homeless. The shame of his reality crashed into him. He looked at this powerful woman, and he thought of Lily waiting in the cold. He couldn't build a foundation on a lie. "I've never been to Dubai," Mark said softly. Eleanor frowned. "Excuse me?" "I didn't go to Oxford," Mark continued, his voice shaking. "And I'm not the Marcus Sterling you're expecting. My name is Mark Sterling. I'm here for the janitor position. Eleanor's face went blank. She looked at the resume on her tablet, then at Mark. The confusion in her eyes turned to shock, and then, slowly, a hardening of her features. The atmosphere in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Is this a joke?" she asked coldly. "How did you get in here?" "The receptionist," Mark explained hurriedly, standing up. "She saw my last name, it was a mix-up. I tried to tell her. I tried to tell you. But I really need a job, ma'am. I saw the blueprint and I answered. I'm sorry to have wasted your time." He turned to leave, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He had blown it. He wouldn't even get the cleaning job now. He was going to have to tell Lily they were moving into a shelter. "Sit down," Eleanor said. Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was curious. Mark hesitated. "I said, sit down." Mark slowly sat back down. Eleanor picked up the file on her tablet and deleted it. She placed the tablet face down. "You're applying for a janitor role, yet you just diagnosed a structural and functional flaw in a $200 million project that 3 Ivy League graduates missed. Who are you, Mark?" And then, Mark told her the truth. He told her about how he had been a contractor and a designer years ago. He told her about his wife, Sarah. How she got sick, a rare, aggressive cancer. How the insurance didn't cover the experimental treatments. How he sold his business, his truck, and eventually the house he had built with his own hands to pay for her care. He told her how he held Sarah's hand when she passed away a year ago. He told her about the depression that followed, the hole in his life, and how he was trying to rebuild it for Lily, but the gap in his resume and his lack of a current address made it impossible to get hired in his field. He told her about the eviction notice in his pocket. "I'm not asking for charity," Mark said, his eyes welling up with tears he refused to let fall. "I'm a hard worker. I'll clean the floors. I'll fix the lights. I just need to take care of my little girl. She's the only thing I have left." Eleanor Vance, the woman known as the Ice Queen of the city, sat perfectly still. She looked at Mark's worn-out suit. She looked at his rough hands, hands that had built homes and cared for a dying wife. She thought of her own life. She had billions in the bank, buildings named after her, and global fame. But she went home to an empty penthouse every night. She had sacrificed her personal life for her career, and somewhere along the way, she had forgotten why she started building things in the first place, to create spaces for people to live, to love, to be safe. She stood up and walked over to the window, looking down at the city. "My father was a bricklayer," she said softly, her back to Mark. "He didn't have a degree. But he knew more about buildings than any architect I ever employed. He taught me that a building without a heart is just a pile of stones." She turned back to Mark. Her eyes were glistening. "You are not getting the janitor position," Eleanor stated firmly. Mark's heart shattered. He nodded, standing up to leave. "I understand. Thank you for listening, Ms. Vance." "Sit down, Mark," she barked, a small smile breaking through her tough exterior. "You're not listening. I said you aren't getting the janitor position. That would be a waste of a brilliant mind and a compassionate heart." She walked back to the table and picked up the red marker. She handed it to him. "I am firing the lead consultant on the community center project. He lacks the vision you spoke of. I want you to take over as the project lead for the interior functionality. It comes with a signing bonus, a company car, and a salary that will ensure you and Lily never have to worry about rent again." Mark stared at the marker in his hand. He couldn't breathe. "Ms. Vance. I don't have the degree. The board will never approve it." "I am the board," Eleanor said, slamming her hand on the table for emphasis. "And I don't care about a piece of paper. I care about the man who saw that a parent couldn't see their child. That is the man I want building my company." She paused, her voice softening. "And one more thing. This building, It's too cold. Too corporate.